For thousands of years, dragons breathed fire. That's what made them dragons. However, as fantasy and storytelling changed, so did they. All of a sudden, dragons could breathe acid, lightning, ice, poison, and more. So why this change? Where did these other elemental dragons originate? Did Dungeons & Dragons make them up? Or did they steal it from somewhere or someone else? All those answers and more in this episode of History vs. D&D. This video is one of many community videos for Dragon Week. This is a continuation of last year's Kraken Week, where all of your favorite creators got together and all do thematic, monstrous videos. The playlist to everyone else's video will be in the description below in a dragon playlist, hosted by Ginny D and Pointy Hat, fellow YouTube creators, although you probably already know who they are. And just like we explored the history of Krakens last year, today we will be exploring the history of dragons. But with dragons having so much history than literally any other fantasy creature, we have to narrow it down. So, the birth and evolution of their iconic breath weapon it is. In 2004, you may have obsessed, like me, over a faux documentary called Dragons: A Fantasy Made Real, formerly titled The Last Dragon, taking a scientific approach to how a large dragon could fly or how they could realistically breathe fire. One theory is that they chewed on platinum-rich rock, which they used as an igniter for a helium-filled organ that acted as a fuel reservoir. Watching this as a 9-year-old, I was absolutely convinced that dragons were real. It wasn't long also that I had my hands on Dragonology, the complete book of dragons where it actually had textile things you could hold and touch. Needless to say, dragons have long been a creature of imagination, imbuing curiosity in young creative minds. In fact, fire-breathing beasts have been one of the most famous, if not the most famous, magical creature of any decade. Fire-breathing monsters go back as far as biblical times, if not further, where the Leviathan was described in Job 41 as exhaling fire and smoke. Scholars believe that the fire-breathing element of dragons was often a depiction of the mouth of hell and the flames of Hades belching out of it. In Homer's Iliad describes the Chimera as the terror that breathed fire. You also had the Typhon of Greek mythology as a fire-breathing monster, and some even thought the Chimera of Greco-Roman myth, who breathed fire, was an early prototype for dragons. Which makes sense, with the Chimera's early depictions being an amalgamation of different creatures that included lion faces, bird feathers, and serpent-like forms, which could have split off to form the Chinese dragon, the Quetzalcoatl, and the European dragon as it evolved over the decades. Even in West African folklore, you have the Ninki Naga, a winged creature with the body of a crocodile that could breathe fire. And in South America, in Mapuche mythology, we have the Tentenviu, a giant snake god that had fiery breath and smoking nostrils. Japan, the Philippines, Korea, North America, basically every mythology in the world has some sort of fire-breathing serpent somewhere in their mythology. If you ask a skeptic, dragons could have also just originated as a colorful description of natural disasters, a spewing fire from the mouth of a volcano, a beast that could wipe out entire cities with fire. Just ask anyone who lived in Pompeii. So dragons, in a way, symbolized the unpredictable and powerful forces of nature. It wasn't until the Anglo-Saxon epic poem Beowulf that the first fictional appearance of a fire-breathing European dragon was depicted, where Beowulf, the first dragon slayer, fought this dragon who represented evil, destruction, and greed. Unfortunately, we do not know the author of Beowulf, but it is theorized that the writer was inspired by the biblical Leviathan. What we do know is that it eventually inspired a writer named J.R.R. Tolkien, who used this dragon to create the infamous character Smaug in The Hobbit. We could go into the history of dragons' hoards and love of gold, but that's an entirely other episode. But then Beowulf's dragon also inspired the fight between Harry Potter and the Hungarian Horntail in The Goblet of Fire. Then basically those expanded into every other instance of fire-breathing dragons in the media. When we look at dragons breathing anything other than fire, there is a lot less examples. However, there are some. Like the Beathir, a Celtic snake-like dragon that was depicted with many limbs and breathing lightning instead of fire, which directly influenced the Behir in Dungeons & Dragons. Then the Hydra of Greek myth, considered a multi-headed dragon, which spat poison instead of fire and would burn the victim like acid. This even influenced the Komodo dragon when sailors reported encountering it on their voyages. It was believed that its bite was venomous due to its bacteria-filled mouth, but that myth was busted in 2013. As far as dragons that could breathe ice, there was even fewer, at least in ancient myth. But there were a few that were related to the cold and winter, where dragons were used by the Vikings to describe the harshness of winter. Then a dragon made of pure ice in 1899 by author E. Nesbitt. But this one didn't breathe ice, it just turned things into ice with its touch, like an ice Midas. The first depiction of an actual ice-breathing dragon wasn't until 1933 in the book Ojo in Oz. Yes, the same Oz that Dorothy and Elphaba come from. Then Tolkien added a ice-breathing dragon in the poem Scatha the Worm in 1959. Even with all of those examples, George R.R. Martin then also wrote a short story in 1979 called The Ice Dragon, and actually claimed that this was the first official ice dragon. At least as far as dragons that breathed ice and was made of ice as well. A true ice dragon. So he was kind of right, as it was the first time that these were combined specifically, but I think when it comes to popularizing ice dragons, that actually fell on the game system Dungeons & Dragons. In preparation for this Dragon Week video, Dottie from Mystic Arts kindly pointed me towards some articles written by Gary Gygax in 1969, 2 years before the first iteration of Dungeons & Dragons called Chainmail was even published. The articles are also later included in the 50th anniversary book, The Making of the Original Dungeons & Dragons. During this time in 1969, a fanzine called Thengorodrim, if I pronounced that correctly, used variant rules inspired by Tolkien's works called Mordor vs. the World, for a game called Diplomacy that was played through the mail. Gary Gygax decided to submit a series to the zine called Great Worms, spelled very weirdly here, describing the characteristics of different dragons and different types. White, black, green, blue, and even purple, each with their own ecology and breath weapons, but with the purple dragon having a scorpion-like sting instead. Even then, we were homebrewing our own lore and rules for different games. The red dragon would have been included also, but the zine was unfortunately discontinued. Later, Gary Gygax made them his own in Chainmail, then again officially in the first iteration of Dungeons & Dragons in 1974. Though then the purple dragon actually became something else entirely, but again, another episode. But here he clarified the colors of the dragons. Red is fire, blue is lightning, green is poison or chlorine gas, black is acid, and white is cold or ice. Now, homebrewing doesn't come as naturally to others, nor does weaving things into an impactful narrative. Luckily, you have some help where Gary Gygax never had, which brings us to our sponsor of today's video, Goalforger. Goalforger is an AI-assisted app that transforms RPG campaigns with living and breathing NPCs, cities, and more. Living meaning that your world lore, factions, and players' actions dynamically interact and mold deep and satisfying narratives. All you have to do is write in all the information of the player backstories and faction goals, then the AI will do the rest, creating plot hooks, story arcs, full interweaving adventures, and more without the overwhelming prep work. Have it help you create the entire campaign as a whole, or flesh out each session to make each one feel impactful. Goalforger is starting its backer kit soon to help transform their vision into a full-featured application for the community. Sign up to be notified through the link below, or if you're watching this in the near future, ensure your spot by backing it now. In my next video, I will actually be diving more into the features myself, so stay tuned. But let's get back to what happened to breath weapons as they kept evolving with the growth of Dungeons & Dragons, because rest assured, just the 5 chromatic dragons were not enough for Gary Gygax. Also in the first iteration of D&D was the first appearance of a gold dragon as a second fire-type dragon. A full group of metallic dragons, brass, bronze, copper, gold, and silver, wouldn't be introduced until the Advanced Dungeons & Dragons edition in 1977. Each of them corresponding to similar elements as well: fire, lightning, acid, fire again, and cold respectively. Just more good-aligned dragons instead of just evil ones. I don't know why poison got shafted for an additional fire, but maybe we'll never know. But these dragons also got an additional breath weapon of more utility. Brass got a sleeping breath, bronze got a repulsion breath, copper got a slowing breath, gold got a weakening breath, and silver got a paralyzing breath. This set them apart from their chromatic siblings, and was the first time we saw breath weapons that did anything other than elemental damage. Then, in 1980, dragons got a third grouping called Gem Dragons from the 37th issue of Dragon magazine, then later added to editions of the Monster Manual. These dragons were of neutral alignment to complete the alignment categories of good, evil, and neutral. Their shtick was that they were all psionic, or psychic, in different capacities, which many people actually didn't like, but thankfully got revived later in later editions. With D&D's new expanded damage types, we had Amethyst with a Force Breath, Crystal with a Radiant Breath, Emerald with a Psychic Breath, Sapphire with a Thunder Breath, and Topaz with a Necrotic Breath. Now, with all of D&D's damage types having a home with at least one dragon. But if you think that that's where it ends, or that's all of the dragons that Dungeons & Dragons has, you would be way off, and you would know it. I mean, it is a game about dragons after all. We had a grouping of Ferrous dragons, which are all metallic lawful dragons of chromium, cobalt, iron, nickel, and tungsten, which could breathe ice, magnetism, gas, acid, and sand, respectively. The Dungeon Dad has a few videos on these puppies if you want to learn more. Then we had lung dragons that looked more like your classic Eastern-inspired dragons with animal forms instead of breath weapons. Then things got really crazy with planar dragons that lived across many planes and dimensions of the D&D cosmology that included astral dragons, ethereal dragons, shadow dragons, fairy dragons, rust dragons, and like 15 more. These could range anywhere from singing you magically inspiring songs to their breath weapon actually being made out of swords. There was elemental dragons made entirely of ice, fire, air, or earth, rainbow dragons, invisible dragons, zombie dragons, etc. Then you got even more obscure with time dragons stopping time with their breath, and brain stealer dragons breathing parasitic tadpoles into your brain that transforms you into a mind flayer, and the list continues. With a couple exceptions, most of these dragons, unfortunately though, have not been updated for the newest versions of Dungeons & Dragons, and I wish I could go into the specifics of each one, as they are all so unique and interesting. But, suffice it to say, at this point, anything goes as far as breath weapons for dragons. If it exists, there is probably a dragon that breathes it. And that is probably what I love about fantasy and games like Dungeons & Dragons the most. If you want a dragon to breathe poison dart frogs onto the hero's face, you have the utmost permission to do so. I will include a link to the wiki on all of the different dragons that have existed over the course of the D&D history in the link below. And let me know your favorite dragon iteration in the comments below. Then go out and add your own dragon before George R.R. Martin tries to take credit for it. If you love your D&D monster history, then check out my in-depth video on the Displacer Beast or the Tarrasque. But I do have one more thing to add before we go. Now, as we are at the end of the video, I wanted to share something more of a personal note. I debated sharing this on my channel because I don't like drawing attention to my personal life or misusing the platform that I have built, nor your trust. However, if I can't use my own platform to bless and help my own family, then why do I even have it? That said, me and my wife are about to give birth to our first baby boy named Atlas. In fact, as this video is pre-recorded, we are likely currently staying at an out-of-town hospital in preparation for the birth or awaiting recovery in the NICU. Unfortunately, our little Atlas has developed with spina bifida, a condition where normally a portion of the spinal cord bulges from the back. In his special case, it is an open wound to his spine, which has many medical implications which I won't go into detail here. This will require a few surgeries immediately after birth and continual care as he grows up, depending on the severity of his condition, which we won't know at length until he is born. If you would like to help, or just as a thank you to my many years of making videos on this channel, there is a link to our GoFundMe page in the link below. You can find more information there. We are confident our monetary goal there will help us immensely in his first year of life, as we want to focus less on where our next paycheck and money is going to come from, and more about just loving our firstborn child. If you would like something in return for your donation, you can also support me on Patreon, where you can access the Everything tier for just $10, get my whole library of ongoing D&D homebrew with subclasses, magic items, and more, and then you can unsubscribe again right after. This will all go towards Atlas and his continual health. With his whole world literally riding on his back, you can see why Atlas was such a perfect name. If you could help lighten that load, my family will be forever grateful. In whatever case, thank you all for continuing to support my family by watching my videos, commenting, and sharing your amazing ideas with me. I may be taking a small break in video content here soon for obvious reasons, but until then, go out there and make your world a better place.